Every course that any of us ever takes always comes with a textbook. The teacher's dream is that you actually read all of the chapters that they ask you to, but the reality is sometimes you just do what you can to get yourself from one test to the next until the class is over. When you're in your core classes, though, it is really important that you read these textbooks just like it is when you're in your gen eds, because important information is coming from those books, which is why we have them. But they're just so horrible to read, especially when they're complicated, or when there aren't a lot of pictures, as my husband would say. So there are some more efficient ways to read chapters out of a textbook rather than spending hours and hours and hours reading one chapter to get to the end of the chapter and be like, what just happened? It's like when you drive home and you pull in your driveway and you have no idea of how you got there and turn around hoping that you didn't kill anybody on your drive because your head was just somewhere else. So the idea behind this one is just to give you some techniques and some tips to help you out. So there's a part of a textbook called the frontmatter. And this can help you read the chapters. So it's called frontmatter because it's the stuff that comes in the front or at the beginning of the chapter. So the table of contents, sometimes that's for the entire book, though each chapter itself will have a table of contents, and that's usually the chapter outline. There are chapter objectives. So an objective is something that you should be able to do, know, or understand by the time you finish reading the chapter. And then there's the vocabulary words to pay attention to. So the frontmatter can help you a little bit because the vocabulary and the objectives, those can show you some of the more important concepts that are going to be in that chapter, so you don't have to try and find them all by yourself. So the idea is read the chapter more, not longer. And I know that this is going to sound idealistic, but it really does help. So you want to read one chapter 3 times. You're going to take in the material more. You'll take better notes in class. And believe it or not, reading the chapter 3 times will take less time than when you try and read it once and power through the whole thing. So, this you can pause and check out yourself. But I want to take you through the first time that you're looking at a chapter. The first time that you read a chapter should be before it's talked about in class. And you're not fully reading this. You are skimming the chapter. So you are looking at the bolded terms, you're looking at the section headings, you're looking at the front matter. You are not highlighting, you are not taking notes. All you're doing is getting familiar with the topic that's in that chapter. And it should take you about 20 minutes, if that. So you could do that while you're going to the bathroom. But if you skim the chapter before your lecture, before you're in class, you're going to take better notes because when the teacher talks about the concept, it's going to ring a bell for you because you've already seen it. It's also going to be easier for you to pick out those important concepts while the teacher's lecturing because they match with the stuff that you saw in the book. The final reason is that you're actually going to be able to ask better questions because since you already skimmed over stuff in the chapter, if there was something in the chapter you didn't understand and lecture didn't explain it, now you can ask the teacher right at the beginning and you don't have to wait. So that's 20 minutes. We have 20 minutes. We can handle 20 minutes. The second time that you read a chapter should be done right after the lecture. And you're still not allowed to highlight everything. So when you highlight, you only want to highlight 10% of the entire chapter. So that means if the chapter is 10 pages long, you would only be able to highlight 1 page. Highlighting is not coloring. Highlighting is when you want to make something stand out that's important. So what's good with highlighting is you can actually highlight random words from various sentences, and those highlighted words will create a new sentence or a new paragraph or something like that. So things to highlight would be the stuff that the teacher covered, statistics that were covered, and important concepts. This should take about 30 minutes. So far we've read the chapter twice, and we're at 50 minutes, which isn't too bad, and that still stays within our time frame about reading. And you still have a chance to ask the teacher about anything that might be confusing or anything that might not make sense compared to the notes that you took during lecture. The final time that you want to read a chapter is about 2 to 3 days before the test. You don't want to do it the day before the test, because if you do it 2 to 3 days before, then you still, again, have a final chance to ask the teacher any questions that you might have. If you hear the growling, it's because my dog has decided he wanted to start playing right now. So while you're reading the chapter the third time, this time you're just doing it to refresh your memory. So you're skimming over highlighted areas, you're looking at the notes that you made in the margin of the chapter, and you're comparing it to the lecture notes that you have taken from class. So this should take about 20 minutes. So now you've read the chapter 3 times, and it took you 1 hour and 10 minutes. Think about how long it typically takes you to read a chapter from beginning to end, right before the test when you're cramming for it. Usually with breaks and procrastination, it could easily take 2 hours a chapter. So this is how you could use your study time and your reading time more efficiently. A lot of the times, one of the issues is that the textbook is just really difficult to understand. And when it is, we choose to quit, which is not what we should do. So one thing to do when you don't understand what you're reading is to paraphrase the information. So paraphrasing the information is putting the textbook into your own words. Now you can do this section by section, by paragraphs, or even sentence by sentence, depending on how complicated the material is. So what you would do is you would take the section and then you would put it in your own words in the margin of the textbook. Then when you go back to study, you can read your own notes instead of reading the actual chapter words itself. The other thing that you can do is after you have the information paraphrased, you can run it by your instructor to make sure that you've actually paraphrased the material the right way. Now, most people go, I don't have time to read the chapter. I have to work. I have kids. I have all this stuff. So there are times where you can creatively use your time wisely. Read in the bathroom. Again, if you have long commutes, you can take that hour, read the entire chapter out loud and record yourself reading it, and then play it while you're on the commute. So maybe on the commute to school, you're listening to the chapter that you've dictated, and on the way home, maybe you're listening to the lecture notes from the class from the teacher. Some places where you work might have flex time. So some people, if you work overnight and there's not a lot happening, your boss might allow you to do some homework while you're there. You could also read in the car, but please don't do that if you're the one driving. Make sure you're the passenger. But it's just a way to make better use of the time that you do have. So some students go, wait a minute, I'm a hands-on learner. That's why I'm at a hands-on school. So all of these visual tips are not helping me very much. So some things that you can do is turn your notes into drawings. You can actually sing your notes to a song that you really like so that it helps you. That's actually considered a mnemonic device. You could also find or you can ask the instructor for videos that help reinforce the concepts so that you could actually watch something. Or you could use the online resources that come with the textbook, because a lot of those actually force you to do something like play with flashcards or take a practice test or something like that. So you don't just have to be good at reading or good at reading textbooks to be able to do this. So how do you know if you know it? One thing that's great to do is to create an outline of the chapter. When you've finished reading it, create a test for yourself. Again, you can paraphrase the information, and if you can explain the information to somebody else, then you know that you know it. It's the same kind of deal with how do I know when I'm done studying? And I'm sorry if you've heard any of that background noise, but my puppy decided to be quite rambunctious through that lecture. But I was still able to focus and get through it anyway. So you can still focus and get through stuff anyway, regardless of what distraction is happening. So as much as we might hate reading textbooks, we gotta do it anyway, but we're here to help. Good luck!